And thank you for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here, doing a little broadcasting after the fact. Um, After I have on my guest, that being Pascal Kone, the author of Crimes in the Name of Liberty, we'll be talking about African politics. You know, it's interesting that Pascal, I think, reflects the views of many people in around the world when they look at this election. It reminds them of the kinds of coup d'état that would occur in their countries where someone steps in and declares themselves the winner and is declared the winner by the media and by friends in the institutions, and then they proceed to act like they have won. They control the microphone, and that certainly is the case with Biden. And it is essentially we are witnessing a uh, a slow motion coup d'état right now in this country. The fact that three media outlets decided to step out and declare Biden the winner, which unleashed this almost communistic type um, action on the streets. I saw that here in Boston. And now continue on with this declaration and any criticism otherwise. That shouldn't be happening in this country. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the voter fraud that is emerging because is it not obvious that given the 4 years that this president has had to face literally a coup d'etat inside his government and completely supported by the media and the big institutions, that is exactly what's going on right now? Why would we assume otherwise? We had the claims that President Trump was a spy for the Russians. Then we had the perfect phone call scandal, where by asking the Ukrainian president to investigate corruption on the part of Joe Biden, which is a perfectly legitimate thing to do, somehow he did something that was wrong, and that led to his impeachment. Then you had the political manipulation of the COVID virus, the claims that he's killing people and this sort of stuff, when in fact President Trump has done a great job of handling this virus, very restrained, very Republican, if you will, by allowing the states to function and conduct their own policies to the degree that they need to with federal government assistance. That's why he sent that hospital ship into New York Harbor, which the state of New York did not use. Instead, they put COVID-19 active people into nursing homes, which actually did kill thousands of people. And now this. Now you have voter fraud. Now I want to firstly say that the idea that this is a voter fraud is a red herring. It's not voter fraud in that individuals are casting fraudulent ballots. I think that happens. I think it's always happened, but I think it's rare because that is a felony. You go to jail for that. So it's not really that. It has more to do with the old kind of manipulation, particularly that has gone on with Democratic Party big machines in the inner city, in the big cities, and that is that you have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people on the voter rolls in various states who either have died or they've moved out of the state, and you have corrupt machines. And people say, oh, well, the Republicans do it too. Yeah, I'm sure the Republicans do. But the difference is the Republicans don't control the big cities. They're controlled by these corrupt liberal democratic machines. Republicans might do it in some rural community or some suburb, although it's a lot less likely. The Democrats are doing it and have been doing it in these big cities probably for the better part of the last century. That's why they control them. And President Trump is the man who's stepping up and exposing it. The way it works is as follows. And by the way, this was explained by none other than Chris Matthews, right? Former left wing host at MSNBC, eventually done in by the Me Too movement, who talked about remembering growing up in Philadelphia and seeing corrupt election officials filling out ballots after the polls had closed. This is a subject in the novel Last Hurrah. This has been around for a while. The Last Hurrah was about based on the life of corrupt Boston Mayor James Michael Curley. he had this character, was it Slippery Joe or something, who would go around voting in different precincts for dead people in the name of dead people. So, I mean, there's plenty of evidence that this has been going on for a long time. And the way it works is that when the polls close and the voting is over, you have corrupt officials, corrupt hacks inside the room who look through the list of voters who came in that day. And anyone who didn't come in, if you have any names that were not checked off as having voted, they then go in and fill out the ballots. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, if someone has died or if they were out of state and didn't vote, then the name is left off and the ballot is filled out. It's really becoming obvious to me that this is how the Democrats have been in control of these big cities all these decades. They just fill out the ballots. You can't be a Republican and win in any of these cities. How many Republican mayors have been in New York and well, I mean New York they had Bloomberg, but I mean very centrist, liberal Republican. It's very rare. I mean Chicago, Los Angeles, Boston, Philadelphia, Detroit. They're all run by these big, corrupt Atlanta, big example, big corrupt Democrat machines, and they have committed the alleged voter fraud, not individuals, these machines. Look, let's talk about what we know now, and the information is coming out more and more. And I'm not even going to get into the whole business of the domain software and how that could have flipped 2.7 million votes, and how one of the president's lawyers, Sidney Powell, is saying that she's going to be releasing the Kraken. I hope she does soon, which exposes this electronic machine and how it commits fraud. It's meant to commit fraud. It was created in Venezuela to help elect Hugo Chavez, and there's some Chinese financing there. Talk about foreign interference in an election, and you've got other factors involved. It has more to do with the more conventional type of situations, like for example, in Nevada yesterday, 150,000 ballots were thrown out because they had been cast either by people who were dead or people who were no longer residents of the state. What does that mean? That means that people, after the polls closed, filled out 150,000 ballots in various counties. That's what that means. Now it turns out in Georgia that there are two counties on two different days where after 2 weeks after the election day, they have found that there was 2,700 in one county, 2,400 in another county of votes that simply were not tabulated. That means that this was voter suppression. Now, they're saying it was a mistake. Fine. Let's say it was a mistake. Even so, these are votes by people who cast their votes that were not properly tabulated. And maybe ironically or maybe not ironically, 80% of those votes would have gone to President Trump. Now, I don't know, how many times do they make a mistake like that? Every time there are these mistakes and these missing votes, they're always for Trump. Now, today, President Trump has spent $3 million of campaign money to have a recount in two counties in Wisconsin, both of which are very questionable. In Michigan, you had a deadlock of election board canvassers to again certifying the vote in Wayne County, where you have almost 1,000 affidavits testifying to voter fraud. And when I say voter fraud, again, I'm not talking individuals. I'm talking about people counting ballots, hundreds of thousands of ballots after the polls closed. And in the case of Detroit, the allegations, according to sworn affidavits, are that carloads of votes showed up at 4 o'clock in the morning after everyone went home, and that they were all made out to Biden and no one else. I mean, this is, big time voter fraud. And apparently the same thing happened in Milwaukee. Not Milwaukee. Yeah, Milwaukee. Well, apparently they did end up certifying that vote because of huge pressure brought against those two Republicans who were holding out. Now, what kind of pressure, I don't know. But the fact is that if had they not certified that vote, then Wayne County would not have been counted, Wayne County being where Detroit is, in the Michigan vote, and Trump would have won the state, and it might have been over now. I mean, we've come that close. So that combined with the Pennsylvania situation, which has every kind of corruption you can imagine, and testimony from hundreds of people, sworn affidavits witnessing all kinds of stuff going on, including the changing of laws at the last minute. That one I hope will work its way to the Supreme Court, where it'll be finally looked at. But what we're seeing besides these sorts of chicanerous activities is the fact that there are people seeded into the inside, both on the state levels and on the federal level, who are now showing themselves as enabling this agenda. They are a part of this, what I would call a conspiracy. Now, when I say conspiracy, I don't mean that they're all figuring it out and sitting in a smoke-filled room somewhere, although that may be the case. It's simply that their interest in desire to replace Trump and to overthrow Trump, in many cases out of this irrational hatred, and in other cases completely conscious, has led them to commit these kinds of fraudulent acts. I mean, does anyone doubt that this is what's happened? It's becoming more and more obvious, and everyone knows it. And either people are concerned and the concern is growing, or they don't care, or they are trying their hardest to continue to suppress it and to dribble, to ride out the clock, to dribble the ball until the election is certified. And they don't care what it takes. They just want to overthrow this government because of their hatred of Trump. And in some cases, it's a hatred that it's irrational. It's as a result of day after day, year after year of attacks. But in other cases, it is fully rational. It is very much what my guest today talked about, that being Pascal Kone, who talked about African politics. It is that they want to go back to the days when the United States was acting as a gendarme for the world order, when the United States was essentially a province of the world involved in perpetual wars. Already people around Biden are saber rattling, waving the saber rattling, excuse me, to invade the United States into foreign wars. Trump has been against that. He's been trying to de-escalate, and has in many cases. So there's a lot at stake here. There's a lot at stake in the world. There's a lot at stake in this country. And I think that as the agenda of fraud is more and more exposed, then the whole house of cards will collapse, God willing. And I think that what the conspirators did not expect was not only a strong and concerted opposition from a principled leader who is not going to fold the tent and go home, like Richard Nixon did maybe, and also they did not expect a movement that is really unprecedented in America in modern times, one that is connected to nationalist-oriented movements around the world, one that is diverse, one that is a cross-section of people from all walks of life. Hillary Clinton called us the deplorables. Well, guess what? Donald Trump got more minority votes this time than last time, and more than any Republican, I think, since Eisenhower. And in fact, he increased his margins among every demographic of voter except one, that being white men. So I think that once the smoke clears, God willing, and once we ferret out county by county where the fraud has taken place and recalculate those votes, and if Sidney Powell releases the Kraken and we find out that this domain software has flipped millions of votes, what we're going to see is a landslide for President Trump. I think that that's what's going to happen. I predict, God willing. I think we're going to see that he has taken all of the states right now in contention. Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia. I think we may see him pick up a couple of additional states: Minnesota, New Hampshire, Maine, maybe even California. I mean, you have a situation in California where people were going around and voting for homeless people. And they weren't giving those homeless people, by the way, even the option of who they were going to vote for. Never mind the illegality of that. They were just putting Biden votes in their names. California could flip. That would be amazing. And I think that also in Congress, it's going to affect the very narrowed control that the Democrats have on the House. It's the smallest margin of control in 50 years. And not only that, but the radicals have increased. The so-called squad, AOC and three. Now I think they're up to about 7 or 8. So they're going the way of the dodo bird. And the Republicans, I think, easily are going to get both seats, at least one, if not both seats, in Georgia during the special election in December or January, and maybe even some others once the final vote tallies are cleared, possibly one in Michigan. So, this once the real vote comes in, and once the fraud is exposed, and I think it's not going to take much more for the American people to begin to wake up and turn on this, then we're going to see excellent results, true results, which are always good for this country. And we're going to see, good Democrats who don't want to see an election stolen, see what's going on. And even if they don't like Donald Trump, they're going to reject the idea that this kind of action could happen or should happen in this country. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Charles Moscowitz. Have a great afternoon.